steadily it rises. Public preference for Lincoln Continental as the symbol for today's luxury motoring.
Hey, it's Jason ODB, the Lincoln Addict. Here is a 65 Lincoln Continental Convertible. If you're new to the channel, please consider subscribing. If you've been here before, you know the routine. We're going to go through this listing and just try to give an accurate description of what we're seeing. 65, arguably one of the most sought after years, kind of arguably, I say, because there's some people like the 1s, 2s, and 3s. 4s and 5s are very similar. Of course, the 65 has the unique front grille and whatnot. Each year kind of had its own grille, but this one's very distinctive. And so let's jump in. I love the color on this car. I looked at the photos briefly, and it kind of seems like a car that you could just get in and drive and enjoy and not be too concerned with the little details. It's more of a driver. I bought a car similar to this about 5 years ago and have spent some money kind of restoring it, but this definitely kind of looks like a solid foundation from what I can see. It does state 72,000 miles. It is in Connecticut, so that's the Northeast. And if you take a look here, it has the normal stuff that you always see, the 430, 3-speed trans. This one says it's silver paint, 15-inch wheels, and so on and so forth. You can kind of see there. It has a black top. The power-operated top and windows work intermittently. There's a question in the comments below, and I think the gentleman said he tried to get the top to work, and it did not. So we'll look at more photos here. The cabin features the front bench. You can kind of see here, kind of a little bit what I call torn and tattered. I personally, as I've said in the past, I like a car like this because it's kind of, original to a certain extent. Maybe it's been resprayed, but it kind of has that originality to it where you can get in and not feel like you have, it's like some show car that, you can't scratch or you can't really drive, so to speak. The 5-digit odometer shows 72,000 miles. The seller states that approximately 1,000 have been added during his ownership. 4-barrel carb, of course, which is standard. The oil was changed, is what they said. You can see under the car your standard kind of look you're gonna see under here. This doesn't tell us a lot, but I do like to look up underneath here to see if there's any rust. And again, this is heavy duty stuff in here. So typically you're never going to really see much here. You can see that this car has obviously been driven over the years. It does look like possibly the bushings were changed at some point, but not a lot of tell there, so to speak. I'll turn down the volume, and what we're continuing to see from Bring a Trailer, which I love, are these videos, these kind of walk-arounds. The detailed photos show a lot of detail of this car not being a perfect car. And again, I bought a blue 64, very similar to this in some ways. And it just kind of had a lot of these little things to it. And again, I kind of like that originality, especially as long as it's not, a rust bucket, so to speak. It allows for you to then bring the car back to its glory if that's something you want to do. Here is, again, a driving shot, or video rather, and we get a chance to see him kind of getting it up to speed. And for it to be running and driving is great, again, because it gives you kind of some immediate satisfaction. I told someone on the phone recently that you'd never really want to buy a car that you think is going to be running and driving, and it could really put a strain on a relationship with your significant other, depending on how much money you end up dumping in, especially one of these cars. I'll tell you, they're not cheap. Other people will tell you that to restore. And as my friend TC, Teresa Connor, always says, they always need something. Here you see the vent window working. So again, I love that Bring a Trailer probably suggests this to folks. And of course, there are comments where people are asking. In the comment section, he did post additional window videos. A lot of times these slow windows are due to dried up grease, believe it or not. A lot of times this stuff has to be all taken apart and cleaned. You can imagine 60-year-old grease. Might sound crazy, but it does turn to what John Cashman would say, peanut butter. And the vent windows are moving pretty good, but oftentimes the gears have to be replaced in there and other potential work. But the good thing is, they are kind of working for the most part, even if they're slow. We could pause this and see it does have the 2-port, so I've talked extensively about this. You can see basically this is 1 port, this is 2, and there's a T fitting, so some people would say, well, hey, it's a 3-port now. It doesn't really work that way. I don't know why Carter ever went from the 3-port, the originals, to these 2-port replacements, and these things, I like to say that they're pretty much junk. Some people have said, hey, I don't have issues where I live. It doesn't get too hot. Hey, if it's not broke, don't fix it. But I often will just try to keep it real, so to speak, and tell you, if you can, just order from the usual suspects, a rebuilt 3-port, and put that bad boy on there, and you'll be happy you did. We can see it's an AC car because the compressor's here. We can see it as a single reservoir master cylinder, which I've talked about. You really want to switch those out. So this video kind of just shows it running. Hopefully someone is sitting in the car with their foot on the brake. I know you probably get sick of me saying that, but John Lyman and myself and others will tell you, you should never leave these cars running while you're out of the car, or if there's no one in it, simply because we've documented this. They can slip into reverse. They could injure someone, and we've seen plenty of dings in the rear bumpers on these cars that will usually be the tell that they did slip into gear and hit something. Kind of a nice top-up money shot here, so to speak. Kind of a 10-footer shot showing the top up and in front of a real nice house. I'm guessing someone, they took advantage of maybe hiring someone to come out, because the photos overall do look good, and there is kind of a good amount of detailed photos here. Typically what I'm looking at here is I want to look around to see if there's any bubbling. I have said in the past there will sometimes be some bubbling in what they call the dog leg area here, but I like to kind of see, like, hey, is this a really rusted out car that someone's covered up over the years? What I see here looks pretty true. Nothing standing out to me that's making me worried. I do like to look here again, like I've said in the past, to see between the bumper ends and 65 you have the turn signals here. Like to kind of see what the spacing looks like, to see if there's any kind of abnormal spacing, maybe if it had been in a front end collision or anything like that. These are big cars, so they're not the super easiest to park potentially. They do look like bias ply tires. It's hard to tell if these are an older white wall, but you kind of see some of the discoloration here. I will tell you, although some people love the look of a bias ply tire, they're not as safe as a radial. Coker does make a tire, a newer style tire, my understanding, that's kind of a radial that looks like a bias ply. So, forgive me if that's potentially what this is. But the bias ply tires, when I first got my 64 and I drove on them, it's a little bit scary. And if the center link needs to be replaced, which often it does on these cars, it'll lead to the car kind of just wandering across the road. So my suggestion, again, if these are kind of a little bit older of a tire, you'd want to look to update those. And you can see from this angle, I'm pretty certain those are bias plies. The hubcaps were made for bias ply tires, so typically these hubcaps can and will fly off if you do go to a radial, but there are a couple tips and tricks in the Lincoln forum on how you can bend these teeth a little bit, and that will keep them from flying off. I've lost a couple myself. Again, rear 3/4 shot here looks pretty good. I always talk about looking for the ding right here to see if the car ever jumped into reverse. I don't really see anything. Here it looks like just a little bit of a shadow, so like that bumper looks pretty clean. Sometimes you'll see here where they're pulled out just a little bit, and I don't know if that's over the years someone kind of backing over something, but it's hard to tell right there if that is bowed out just a hair. Either way, stuff like that, if it's minor, it can be repaired, but from that angle it does look pretty good. Looks like there could be a little ding here. These bumper ends are getting harder to find that are not rotted out. I just talked to Tony Bolin about these, and you can easily spend $225 to $250 on a bumper end. Again, one that is not rechromed, that is not dented, if you can find one. You can see a little bit of stuff here. I don't know what's going on, if that's like a mud dauber. But again, I do like the detailed photos to kind of show what I'll refer to as the bright work. What does it look like? You can spend time and get in here and polish all this, or you can get it potentially rechromed. But you can kind of see the detail work. You'll tend to see on some of these cars pitting on some of these items. And again, these don't look, I've seen far worse. They look pretty solid overall, pretty nice. Again, detailed work. Here, you could typically polish some of this out. Some of it you're not going to be able to, and you can see some of that pitting that I was talking about here. Again, thinking about this car as a car that I would just want to, love to own and just kind of get in and drive, and that's what I do with my 64. Although I've spent some money on it, easily you can start dumping a ton of money in these cars, and but I didn't go too overboard, and this car is one that I think so far you could potentially get in, enjoy, and if you get the top working and the windows working, you'll be able to get in and enjoy it with the family, and then over the course of time start to maybe blow it apart if that's what you want to do, and bring it back to its glory. And that's kind of what I've been doing with my 64. Here you do have the keyhole. That was a standard item, kind of just seeing some of the body here. And again, you're going to see little things like this on a car that's this old. Typically, that's kind of been a driver that hasn't really been, quote, babied. This is the dog leg area. You'll typically will see this even on my 64. I've got a few little bubbles here. And, eventually at some point, if you were going to get this car painted, you would have a good body shop kind of go in there and fix any of that little stuff. Here, our suspicion, my suspicion's correct. You do have a ding here. Some of this can be pulled out by a good chrome place. I use Advanced Plating in Tennessee, arguably the best in the country. They replated my rear bumper, and I've just seen them do some magical things to make bumpers look amazing. So, shout out to those guys. Standard stuff that you're seeing here with kind of the little nicks and not perfect, so to speak. I love blue Lincolns. This one's kind of a silver color. I really dig it. It's hard to tell here if there's a little dent or what's going on, but this molding here, if you had dents and dings, some folks can pull those out, as with some of the folks that do work on stainless. But if it was too mangled, you'd have to go to like Lincoln Land and pick up a new piece. You can see here this hubcap is about to fall off. You'd really need to get your fist and kind of pound on that a little bit. But again, they will do that on the highway. I have lost 2 and I found 1. So technically I've only lost 1, and it's not fun. And it can be dangerous, definitely going down the highway with these things flying off. On my 64, I've resorted to just leaving them off. I do take them to shows. If I want to kind of pop them on, I can do that. But there are some tricks, again, if you spend the time to bend the teeth, or you can change out the wheels to something like what Colorado Custom does. They make a billet wheel that looks just like the hubcap, and those, of course, are not flying off. Here you can see just some of the detail work. This paint to me definitely is going to have to be redone at one point. You could potentially pay someone to kind of get in here and polish it. But it's not perfect, and they're not presenting it as perfect. And again, I like an original car like this. I might be circling through the photos a second time. It's kind of hard to tell where I ended up at. But you can see here the seats are not perfect. You do have some newer style floor mats in here. These guys are getting harder to find original. I can get these remade, the 65. This is a 1 year only. And if you need those, reach out to me, Lincoln Addict podcast @gmail.com. I think I said this before, but I am a fan of just kind of the originality. I would love to just get in this car and cruise it. You can see speaker pods added here in those factory kick panels. And I apologize, I kind of sometimes go through these photos a little quick, just really trying to keep it, as efficient as possible without spending a lot of time. It is an AC car. If it was not an AC car, 1, we wouldn't have seen the compressor. 2, these vents would not be here, and that's key. If you just had heat, it would just come out underneath the dash. No other features are sticking out. It doesn't have the AM/FM. It doesn't have the tilt column, and it does not have the speed control. Definitely not deal breakers, but those are some features that are, not on as many of these cars, and I've kind of talked about that in other videos. I'm going to hit escape here and just kind of scroll down and see what we're kind of working with the other photos. In here, we can kind of see it does look pretty solid. This is all kind of standard look. It could be polished if you want to spend the time. You got the manuals here, so that's pretty good if they're coming with it. And you got some jumper cables in there, which I always like taking my little jump box with me. You never know what you're going to encounter. Underneath the deck lid, I've talked a lot about how the moisture gets trapped in here. This is not the worst I've ever seen, believe it or not. These deck lids can get pretty bad. But in here, this little bit of rust, I would not freak out over it. This deck lid, believe it or not, is a nice one overall. And to try to find a deck lid for a convertible is not easy. It's to the point where there's reproductions being made out of fiberglass, believe it or not. Yes, you heard that correct. These deck lids could easily go for $3,000 to $5,000 in this condition. So certainly, again, when you see this, if you're new to these cars, don't freak out and go, oh my God, it's a rust bucket. I've seen cars with zero rust that will have this little bit of rust in here. And of course, that's not a zero rust car. But again, this is kind of one of those things that just happens on these cars. And you can have the deck lid removed. You could have a high end or a good body shop kind of go in here and clean all this out. And my understanding, as Chris from Lincoln Land has told us, I believe over the years, it's due to the product that was used from the factory in here, and it tends to hold a moisture. Here you go, a trunk that doesn't look super clean by any means, but I mean, you could spend a weekend and get all this cleaned up. You can buy new carpet kits, and if you watched one of my other videos, there is a bar that you need to install in here. It's going to cost you about 10 or 15, 20 bucks maybe, and that bar that you install on this knob from this side to this side is going to help any or stop any flexing of these cast parts that could potentially break. And if you start breaking these items, you're going to start spending more money, and you don't want to do that. So you can check out my other videos on the channel for how to install that. Again, it's super easy. You just need a helper to help. I can tell you pretty much on this convertible, I'm going to slow down here for a minute because I think we do have the time. Here's the thing. When you buy a car that's this old, you're going to have to spend the money and do the convertible upgrade. All right. There's a place in Naples or down South Florida that sells the entire kit with the rams, the cylinders, the solenoids, all of the lines, and the pump. Okay. You can get in here and you can change it yourself. You can have someone else do it. But the key thing is, a car that's this old, you're going to have to end up changing all that stuff. Let's say you're like, nope, I'm just going to do the rams and cylinders. Okay. Then you're going to have all your new fluid in there, and you're going to have a line blowout, and then all your fluid's going to spill under your back seat or somewhere in the car, and you're going to be cleaning that up. I highly recommend that you update to all of the new stuff. Hydra Electric, I believe is how you pronounce it. I always say it's either Hydroelectric or Hydra Electric, but you'll find them. They sell the convertible parts. I try to remind myself never to zoom in here. And I always don't take heed to my own feedback. Right here, you can see that they have replaced, it looks like, with some steel braided lines. You'll get all new lines with this, so I'm sure at one point this stuff is blown out. But trust me, if you can replace all this stuff, it's not that hard. I've done a couple of videos way back on my channel. You do have to bleed the system. The pump is right in here, and that takes a little bit of effort. You could do it, or you could find a mechanic shop to help you bleed it. But once you get all the air out of it, the system will potentially work good. You also have to tackle the relays that are behind this curtain. There are a couple folks out there that you can send them to, and they'll test them and swap them out if need be, of course, for a fee, if they need to be swapped. But on a convertible of this era, maybe that's been sitting and it's never had a lot of work done to it, you can certainly bet that when you get this car, if the top's not working, like the gentleman said, it's very intermittent, you're going to potentially run into needing to swap all this stuff, and you're going to spend a few grand for the parts, and then you're going to have, of course, your time and the labor. John Cashman is retired. He did sell his business. I know the gentleman that bought it does travel a little bit, but I don't have enough information to really, say, if you should, if you can get a hold of him or what his deal is. I don't know that gentleman. You could see here, okay, in 64, 65, 64, I know they're metal, and 65, I want to say they are fiberglass, and that's why you have this patch piece. So I do get the years kind of mixed up. Some guys will call Lincoln Land and they'll order the 64, if I remember correctly. 64 on my car is metal. 65, I do believe, is fiberglass. So you can order a new one of these fan shrouds, but that's important to have on there because these cars can overheat. And with this fan that you see here, you want to make sure that that air is blowing across that radiator. When I look in here at the engine bay, it's very similar to what I experienced when I bought my 64. It looks a little kind of crusty, so to speak. But again, it's really what's on the inside of the engine, right? So if the oil has been changed and the car runs good, I mean, this car could run another 100,000 miles, right? So looking at the outside, you can kind of say, yeah, if you really wanted, you could blow all this apart. I've done it. You could spend a lot of money rebuilding and cleaning and replacing all the stuff you need to do. If you bought this car, you could easily drive it until the wheels fall off, so to speak. But I will tell you, as things start to go bad, you're going to have to start doing different things, and it's going to kind of what I call snowball into needing to do a lot more. This little piece here, it's held on by, I think it's 3 or 4. Basically helps, keep all that airflow above it kind of coming across the radiator. I like to always look at this to see how crusty it is, and I like to see if there's any holes here for rust. It does not look bad. You got your typical surface rust. This could be sandblasted and powder coated or painted easily. But what I'm seeing here on this real strong cross member, I'm not seeing any rust or holes, which is fantastic. These cars will typically look like this underneath. I'd like to see in the next few photos if we see some of the floor pans back here to see if there is any rust, being that this car is in Connecticut right now. This is all the normal, what I call crust that you're going to kind of see, especially if a car was up north. It doesn't look horrible from what I can tell in the photos. Here is the rear floor pan, and this one doesn't look bad. This is underneath the trunk. The spare tire sits right above it in 64 and 65. This here, again, I would be kind of checking with maybe a screwdriver or my finger. This looks like surface rust for the most part. Exhaust is typically going to just be all thrown away. You're going to end up, needing to replace all of your exhaust. Here, we'll go back and look at the breakdown. 74A is, of course, the convertible. And what do we have going on here? It's kind of hard. Okay, under the doors. Okay. So he's got the doors open here, and what he's trying to show you is that there's no rust, which is good. I mean, I'll be honest, it looks pretty solid. It looks like a car that definitely could be taken and driven or updated. So let's look back here. It's a little easier than me trying to rattle the stuff off the top of my head, and maybe they did not do it this time. I haven't seen where they haven't broken down the VIN, but I've talked about those in the past a little bit. I do believe it was the correct color code for the color that the car is. So kind of odd that they didn't break down the VIN, but it is what it is. I would say overall, this car is pretty solid. It looks like a fun car. I'd love to own it. Being that it's currently at $15,000 with 2 days left, it's hard to say. I mean, to me, all of the convertibles, if they're solid, I really think this could easily go for 30 to 40 grand easy. Will it go over that? I'm not 100% sure. I mean, to me, if I was looking for a convertible, I would definitely consider this car from what I can see. Now, would I like to have someone, maybe a friend in the Northeast, go look at it? Absolutely. There's a few other things I'd like to look at in person or have someone that I can trust look at it. But overall, I think someone's going to end up with a cool car. They're going to drive it a little bit, and maybe they're going to restore it or, dare I say, resto mod with updating some stuff. So that's going to be up to the new owner. If you go down here and just spend a few minutes, you can take a look at some folks asking different questions about the air conditioning. My assumption is the AC doesn't work. He posted more videos, which is fantastic. And you got a lot of people kind of weighing in with their opinions and whatnot. So what do you think it will sell for? Leave a comment if you can. I appreciate the support. Stay on the rise, and we'll hit you guys with another review hopefully soon. We out of here. Peace.